So, let's talk about something a lot of gardeners wonder about: how to actually attract worms to your garden beds, and why it matters more than you might think. Most gardeners believe worms show up because compost is finished and rich. That belief quietly limits soil improvement. When worms don't move in, beds stay compacted longer, nutrient cycling slows, and people assume they need more compost, more inputs, or more time. The real problem is simpler: worms are not attracted to compost itself. They're attracted to what compost is doing biologically, and most compost is already past that phase by the time it hits the soil. If you're serious about growing food and not just recycling waste, this distinction matters. And if Farm Logic helps you cut through habits that don't deliver results, go ahead and subscribe. This channel is about building soil that performs, not soil that just looks right. Worms don't eat compost the way most people think they do. Worms are not scavengers in the way chickens or beetles are. They don't chew chunks of organic matter. Instead, they graze on microbial films, bacteria and fungi growing on soft decomposing surfaces. Compost that's dark, crumbly and stable is often biologically quiet. It smells good, but it's done working. That's why you can add wheelbarrows of compost to a bed and still see very little worm activity weeks later. You improved texture and nutrient content, but you didn't create a feeding zone. Worms pass through finished compost, they don't congregate in it. Food that attracts worms creates a fast microbial bloom. Certain foods trigger microbial growth almost immediately once buried in moist soil. Cooked starches like rice, oats, or pasta are the most reliable. They hydrate instantly, break down quickly, and support explosive bacterial growth within days. In my own raised beds, 1 cup of cooked rice buried 3 inches deep in a 4 square foot area will draw more worms in a week than a full inch of mature compost spread on top. That's not theory. I've dug and counted. The speed matters. Worms move toward fresh microbial activity. Slow decomposing materials don't signal urgency. A lot of compost advice focuses on balancing greens and browns. That's useful for pile management, but it's less useful for worm attraction in beds. What matters more is whether microbes can access both carbon and nitrogen immediately. Cooked food scraps already have water, softened structure, and available carbon. When paired with soil nitrogen, microbes explode. Raw vegetable scraps, especially fibrous ones, take time to reach that stage. By the time they do, worms may already be feeding elsewhere. This is why melon rinds and cabbage cores sit untouched for weeks, while softer foods disappear quickly underground. Burying food properly is non-negotiable. In a typical backyard bed, 2 to 4 inches is the sweet spot. Shallow burial invites flies and rodents. Too deep and oxygen drops, slowing decomposition. Moisture should be similar to a wrung-out sponge. If soil is dry, microbes stall and worms don't bother. If it's saturated, anaerobic bacteria take over and worms avoid it. When I apply food scraps intentionally, I water lightly after burial, then cover with mulch. That keeps conditions stable and predictable. Raised beds respond faster than ground soil. Raised beds warm earlier and drain better, which accelerates microbial activity. Worms respond quickly in these systems because food zones stay aerobic longer. In ground soil, especially clay, response can be slower unless structure is already decent. In those cases, smaller amounts applied more frequently work better than dumping larger portions. The mistake is treating all soils the same. Worm behavior reflects soil physics as much as food type. Worm bins remove the guesswork. Put finished compost on one side of a bin and fresh, soft food on the other. Worms migrate every time. In my bins, the highest worm density is always where food is breaking down right now, not where castings are already formed. Once a zone is processed, worms move on. That same pattern exists in garden soil. It's just harder to see. Compost improves soil structure, buffers nutrients, and feeds plants long-term. It just doesn't pull worms in by itself once it's stable. Compost creates a home. Food creates a reason to stay. The most productive beds I've managed use both. Compost sets the baseline. Targeted food inputs create biological hotspots that worms and microbes build outward from. In a typical vegetable bed, I'll bury half a cup to 1 cup of soft food scraps per 4 square feet every 3 to 4 weeks during the growing season. I rotate locations and never repeat the exact spot back to back. In cooler weather, I reduce amounts and increase depth slightly. In hot weather, I keep applications smaller but more frequent. This approach increases worm counts steadily without creating smell, pests, or nutrient overload. Worm attraction isn't about gimmicks, it's about timing and biology. When worms move in, they bring aggregation, aeration, and nutrient cycling with them. That improves root growth and water infiltration far more effectively than adding more finished material. Once you understand what worms are actually responding to, you stop guessing and start steering the system. Soil responds to activity, not appearance. Dark compost looks good to us, but worms follow function, not aesthetics. If you want living soil, you need living inputs at the right stage of breakdown. This doesn't mean abandoning compost, it means using it with intention instead of expecting it to do everything. If you want more of this kind of practical, tested gardening insight, subscribe to Farm Logic and share this video with someone who's serious about growing better food. Soil health isn't built by tradition alone, it's built by understanding how biology actually works.